The great mass of humankind possesses an unmistakable unit identity. It can be one thing. It can act as a single organism. Duncan Idaho Gola. The urge to conflict went far deeper than consciousness. The tyrant had been right. Humankind acted as one beast. The forces impelling that great collective animal went back to tribal days and beyond, as did so many forces to which humans responded without thinking. Reflections of Bashar Miles Tegg. In DUNE, the word Tau is used to define another facet of human consciousness, the group organism. This is the collective awareness of a group of humans who identify as a cohesive unit. Throughout the DUNE series, Frank Herbert illustrates how groups of humans operate as single organisms, and how these organisms' impulses influence the individuals within the group. The definition of Tau, given in the DUNE appendix, reads, in Fremen terminology, that oneness of a Sikh community. In the original DUNE, Jessica, the mother of Paul Muad'Dib, is the first to reflect upon the nature of Tau consciousness.
There was nothing of telepathy here. She knew. It was the Tau, the oneness of the Sikh community. They felt and reacted sometimes like a single organism.
In DUNE, Tau awareness emerges when a collection of humans is so integrated by common experience, language, belief and emotion that they are unconsciously in tune with the overall mood of the group. Their reactions, thoughts and feelings are in sync, and they wordlessly understand how their fellows are orienting their behavior in response to an event. In that instant, their self-identity is submerged within that of the group. In an account of the life of Pardot Kynes, the imperial planetologist, we read the following. The Tau of a Sikh tells its members what they must do. Even the most brutal necessity is known. Events in the book reveal that Tau is concerned with survival. It alerts individuals to events that may disrupt, benefit or harm the group, whether they are external threats or internal changes. Thus aligned, the individual's response falls into a known and predictable pattern that harmonizes with others. Tau can also be experienced as a bonding or communion, a shared emotional and even physical catharsis, such as the Tau orgy, in which the individual is submerged in the collective experience. But Tau can be limiting as well. According to Muad'Dib, law and duty are one. So be it, but remember these limitations. Thus are you never fully self-conscious. Thus do you remain immersed in the communal Tau. Thus are you always less than an individual. In this passage, Muad'Dib is suggesting that sometimes it is necessary for an individual to diverge from unthinking obedience to the collective mind, lest we become as drones in a hive. On the largest possible scale, the human species itself can act as a single organism, pursuing its own goal to adapt and expand with scant regard for the lives of individuals. Early in the first DUNE book, at the time of Paul's encounter with Begum Jabbar, Gaius Helen Mohayim says to Jessica,
You well know the pattern of our affairs, Jessica. The race knows its own mortality and fears stagnation of its heredity. It's in the bloodstream, the urge to mingle genetic strains without plan. The Imperium, the Chome Company, all the great houses, they are but bits of flotsam in the path of the flood.
The Bene Gesserit view war and other large-scale human phenomena arising in part from a deep-seated species-level fear of stagnation. Thus, the need to compete group against group to keep the species evolving and to constantly refresh the gene pool with new admixtures. Frank Herbert, in an essay entitled Listening to the Left Hand, put it this way. Think of our human world as a single organism. This organism has characteristics of a person, internal reaction systems, personality, fixed conceptualizations, regular communication lines. You and I are no more than cells of that organism, solitary cells that often act in disturbing concert for reasons not readily apparent. Much of the total species organism's behavior may be better understood if we postulate collective aberrations of human consciousness. If the human species can be represented as one organism, maybe we would understand ourselves better if we recognized that the species organism, all of us, can be neurotic or even psychotic. This idea that humans are at least at some level members of larger superorganisms is not new. The eminent psychologist Carl Jung, Herbert was an avid reader of Jung's, spoke of the collective unconscious. Author Lisa Fritcher describes it thus. Jung's conception is that we are not motivated solely by impulses originating in ourselves, but rather that the accumulated experience of mankind expresses itself through us. The behavior patterns, along with the mental templates that impel them and which have allowed us to adapt and survive, reside deep in our neural systems. They guide both our individual actions and our orientation towards other humans, whether in or out of the various groups we identify with. We experience these wordlessly, but they surface in dreams, myth, art, storytelling and religion. This would explain why so many of the world's mythologies bear striking resemblances. Recent findings in human group dynamics have been admirably synthesized by widely acclaimed scientist and author Howard Bloom in a book entitled The Lucifer Principle, a scientific expedition into the forces of history. As Bloom puts it, men and animals do not merely struggle to maintain their individual existence. They are members of larger social groups, and all too often it is the social unit, not the individual, whose survival comes first. This is reminiscent of Reverend Mother Mohiam's claim to Paul during the Gom Jabbar ordeal that
a human would remain in the trap, that he might kill the trapper and remove a threat to his kind.
Bloom makes the further point that not only is the individual guided by a larger group consciousness, but that groups themselves compete against other groups, whether the individuals within those groups desire it or are even aware of it, and further, that this process is a necessary one, for it is how the human species continues to evolve. Bloom describes it thus. Among humans, groups have all too often been the prime movers. It is their competition that has driven us on the inexorable track toward higher degrees of order. Bloom makes the case that the dark side of this intergroup competition that our and many other species are so prone to is the reason why we are capable of such cruelty toward other humans. We are carrying out the mandate of the supergroup, which is to dominate the gene pool, and that entails, among other things, controlling territory and resources, as well as eliminating rival males and stealing their fertile females. Individual happiness, freedom from pain and even life itself are all secondary to the interests of the group. The group, or an opposing group, will pursue its master agenda, even if it inflicts much suffering on us individuals. This is what Bloom calls the Lucifer Principle. As he puts it, death, destruction and fury do not disturb the mother of our world. They are merely parts of her plan. Only we are outraged by the Lucifer Principle's consequences, and we have every right to be, for we are casualties of nature's callous indifference to life, pawns who suffer and die to live out her schemes. One result: from our best qualities come our worst. From our urge to pull together comes our tendency to tear each other apart. From our devotion to a higher good comes our propensity to the foulest atrocities. From our commitment to ideals comes our excuse to hate. Since the beginning of history, we have been blinded by evil's ability to don a selfless disguise. We have failed to see that our finest qualities often lead us to the actions we most abhor: murder, torture, genocide and war. For millennia, men and women have looked at the ruins of their lost homes and at the precious dead whom they will never see alive again, then have asked that spears be turned to pruning hooks and that mankind be granted the gift of peace. But prayers are not enough. To dismantle the curse that Mother Nature has built into us, we need a new way of looking at man, a new way of reshaping our destiny. As Bloom describes it, the group compels the individual to tend to act defensively towards members of her own group, and with hostility toward outsiders. And this unconscious impulse expresses itself in many ways, some directly, some unconscious, some through culture and also through memes. When a group is under pressure, it seeks conformity. It seeks to unite to meet the threat with unified action. A divided group is a weakened group. It therefore puts pressure on nonconformists to fall in line and respect the pecking order. When things are good, the group will typically relax its internal repression of individuality and let the creative juices flow. This is a time for consolidation and growth, and these require human creativity. For Bloom, the pecking order and the tension between individuality and conformity are the key dynamics of any human group, gang, team, tribe, collective or society. The established power elite tend to favor stability and therefore cultural uniformity under their control. The wider population, however, strives for a measure of freedom to creatively better their own individual situations. This can lead to the emergence of new nodes of power which may threaten the established elite. This tension between the conservative and the liberal pressures of society is one of the key dynamics of history. For when one side or the other becomes overbearing, it often leads to revolutionary conditions. According to Bloom, 5 phenomena underlie the behavior of the human superbeing, of which we individuals are only constituent cells. He describes them thus. 1. The principle of self-organizing systems, replicators, bits of structure that function as mini-factories, assembling raw materials, then churning out intricate products. These natural assembly units, genes are one example, crank out their goods so cheaply that the end results are appallingly expendable. Among those expendable products are you and me. 2. The superorganism. We are not the rugged individuals we would like to be. We are instead disposable parts of a being much larger than ourselves. 3. The meme, a self-replicating cluster of ideas. Thanks to a handful of biological tricks, these visions became the glue that holds together civilizations, giving each culture its distinctive shape, making some intolerant of dissent and others open to diversity. They are the tools with which we unlock the forces of nature. Our visions bestow the dream of peace, but they also turn us into killers. 4. The neural net. The group mind whose eccentric mode of operation manipulates our emotions and turns us into components of a massive learning machine. 5. The pecking order. The naturalist who discovered this dominance hierarchy in a Norwegian farmyard called it the key to despotism. Pecking orders exist among men, monkeys, wasps, and even nations. They help explain why the danger of barbarians is real and why the assumptions of our foreign policies are often wrong. According to Bloom, nature moves from simple systems, such as atoms or bacteria, to more complex ones, such as molecules or people. Through a process of competitive replication, the most complex systems of all are the human superorganisms that are made up of separate quasi-autonomous units, us. Since from nature's point of view we are self-replicating, there is little need for it to be concerned for our well-being and happiness. Nature lets us worry about that. Survival is the name of the game. We do that by coalescing into groups that can achieve much more than mere individuals can, and by excluding and competing with other groups to access limited resources. Our main objective is securing an abundant food supply, but once that is achieved, we go on to ever more elaborate adaptations. We are bound to each other as a neural network, sharing information and organizing activity, and those activities largely take place by sharing memes, which Bloom describes as information packets that transfer and stick readily from one human to another. The most fundamental meme is the pecking order, which determines how power is distributed in the group, and therefore the general direction that superorganism will take. Bloom often gives the example of a beehive. A bee appears to be going about its daily routine of finding food, mainly for its own benefit. But in fact, the bee's behavior, beyond finding a minimum of food for itself, is entirely orientated around the group. When it finds food, it returns to the hive to alert others, who then stream out to gather the food for redistribution at the hive. Specialized bees perform specialized functions: builder, fighter, watcher, feeder. But they are all orientated around the integrity of the hive, and above all, the safety of the queen. Humans are also orientated around the needs of the group: food, security, room for growth. But unlike other animals, we also like to experiment, to diverge from known paths, to express our individual talents and creativity. That special human ability to step outside ourselves and to project into the future, to shape reality, to dream of new possibilities of ways to protect our loved ones in an unpredictable world, to enhance our welfare and even our pleasure and comfort, are the keys to our hyper-adaptability. In the narrower meaning, then, Tau awareness is the sense the individual has for the mood and inclination of the tribe, and how the tribe in turn influences the behavior of the individual. In the broadest sense, Tau concerns itself with the challenge of survival for the human species, the group organism of which we are part, and this is the second great theme of DUNE. Frank Herbert is drawing attention to the fact that our technological power has grown to such a degree that our ability to oppress and destroy other groups of humans has reached new, dangerous, and potentially species-threatening heights. This includes the threat of advanced weapons, to be sure, but more importantly, the threat of advanced systems, particularly the AI systems that Bill Joy, Elon Musk, and Stephen Hawking are warning us about. The means to control large populations in the hands of human superorganisms that wish to do away with other human superorganisms, as the Nazis did towards the Jews for example, is a new and particularly insidious threat facing our species. In DUNE, the superorganism dynamic plays out through the competition between House Atreides and House Harkonnen, as well as their attendant alliances, namely the Imperium on the side of House Harkonnen, and the oppressed but autonomous Fremen tribes on the side of House Atreides. The stakes are the wealth and power that control over spice production implies, and ultimately rule over the entire human universe. And after much maneuvering, these two colossal supergroups collide in a final showdown on the plains of Arrakeen to determine which one shall reign supreme. In the end, the Atreides superorganism triumphs and goes on to impose its worldview, to spread its memes, including political structures and religious beliefs, throughout the known universe. For it was these memes, such as the Fremen's belief in the coming of a savior who will make the desert bloom, or the Bene Gesserit search for a genetic superbeing through selective breeding, that paved the way for the Atreides ascendancy. However, we must not forget the Lady Jessica's deviation from her group's mandate. It was her individual decision that ultimately decided the fate of the superorganism, and the power of the individual to influence is a prominent theme in DUNE. Indeed, at heart, DUNE is a warning to mankind that simply following the diktats of the hive will lead humanity into a trap. Throughout the epic events that follow in Muad'Dib's wake, Paul's greatest regret is the religious war that will sweep through the known universe, killing untold billions in his name. He knows that beneath the Fedaykin's cry of Muad'Dib lies the expansive craving of the Atreides Fremen superorganism in its quest to seed the universe. And though nominally the leader of this explosive expansion, he is powerless to stop it. Though Jessica altered the superorganism's trajectory, once set in motion, the will of the supergroup is stronger than any one individual, even a Kwisatz Haderach.